So it's 11:01 and today is Europe Day. So happy Europe Day, everybody, and welcome to FEPS and Policy Solutions webinar on the European Dream. My name is FREITAS and I'm FEPS Senior Policy Advisor, and I'll be moderating today's very exciting discussion on European dreams and the future of Europe. And first, I would like to thank everybody who's joining us on Zoom. So many of you have registered and are online with us following this debate. And so we would like you also to invite by engaging in the discussion with FEPS team by making use of the hashtag EUDream. Additionally, we're also looking forward to relay your questions to the impressive lineup of speakers that we have in store for you, and also our special guest. So make sure to engage in the chat box on Zoom and to state your name, your country, and clearly address your question to a given speaker. Secondly, I would also like to wholeheartedly thank some of the FEPS team colleagues who have been very, very supportive for the realization of this project today. I would like to thank FEPS directors who oversaw the project, notably Anja Skripczek, but also David Rinaldi, and especially thank Elena Gil, FEPS New Media Advisor, and Celine Gedge, FEPS Project Officer, who are making the EUDream webinar happen. Thirdly, I would like to thank very much on behalf of FEPS, the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, our Hungarian member foundation, Policy Solutions, the authors of the EUDream report, and Tamás in particular, because today is not only a very exciting day, because it's Europe Day, a very important celebration for the European Union as a political project, but for us as the EUDream report has been unveiled and it's already online for you to download. So the European Dream report, as I said, is already available for all of you online, and it's a landmark survey. It covers 14 of the European Union's most populous member states. And our research defines the European Dream by providing insights on the hopes and expectations that EU citizens have for Europe as a shared project. And today's discussion, the European Dream, is the first contribution by FEPS to the Future of Europe debate and conference. And as policymakers debate the future of the European Union, and you'll hear more about them later on today, this research, the European Dream, takes a special importance. And to present the main highlights of the European Dream today, we have Tamás BOROS, co-director of Policy Solutions, and also Dániel Bartha, executive director from the Center for Atlantic Integration and Democracy. So over to you, Tamás, for the first highlights of the EUDream report.
Thank you, Maria, and good morning, everyone. Vice President, FEPS Secretary General, it's a pleasure to, end this huge project about the European Dream, which we started over a year ago. And let's get into the middle of our results to show what we believe the European Dream is. So let me share you a few slides on this project. I hope everybody can see our slides, because in the next 15 minutes we will present what the European Dream is. And we believe that everyone, of course, has heard about the American Dream. So this concept that every American citizen has the chance to make their luck, regardless of their social background, skin color, or religious affiliation. But our question was, what is the European Dream? And we used to have an answer for that one 70 years ago, exactly 70 years ago, when the Schuman Declaration was presented by, Robert Schuman. And we knew that at that time, he wanted a continent of peace and solidarity. And we know that at that time, he wanted a Europe without division and war, and he wanted an even closer union. But what is the European Dream now in 2020? Well, we were interested in whether Europeans today still share the founder's dream. And to get to know this, FEPS and Policy Solutions started a landmark survey in 14 EU member states. This is the 14 largest EU member states, the most populous ones, and we asked altogether 15,000 people to get to know their opinion about the future of Europe. I would like to underline here that we conducted this research last year, so before the current pandemic. And well, as you all know, this will be the first full year for the new European Parliament and the new European Commission. So we believe that every decision maker should have a more in-depth knowledge of what kind of Europe citizens want and what kind of Europe they demand. And we, of course, all know that 5 years is not enough to fulfill all dreams, but we still believe that 5 years can be enough to bridge the gap between EU institutions and EU citizens. So that is also why we launched this whole project. So let's see what the dreams are, and I give the first floor to Dániel to show the first results.
Thank you very much, Tamás. Let me also welcome everybody on this day, and let me show you some of the findings we had at the EU Dream report. I encourage everybody to read the full report for further information on national level findings and even sub-national level findings. This will rather introduce now the bigger picture of this presentation. First line is that we asked people which countries offer the best life according to the citizen in the EU 14 and why. So we better learn which country is the closest to our dreams at this point. Where do we dream to live our life? And we assess this on a global scale. And our survey showed that Europe is still the best place to live. Almost every second European considers that the country where they currently live is the best for living, and obviously residents in the wealthier countries we surveyed were twice as likely to respond that their country is the best than those living in poorer member states. But still, it's a very high number. The most selected country. European country was Switzerland, and it's important to notice that only 30% of those who selected another country than their own selected a country outside of Europe. So we very much like to live on this continent, and also those who selected, also those of this 30% dominantly selected countries sharing history and culture with Europe. So that's basically the United States, Australia, or Canada. Among those selected the countries, another country to live, the top 9 destination was selected by more people than the remaining 200 countries and overseas territories that we listed as an option, suggesting that Europeans have a very clear view which countries they consider the best to live. We also asked, sorry, just a second, what would contribute for the European citizens to have even more happiness. So how can they achieve even greater happiness, and what would be the decisive factor that could be improved? Financial security was obviously mentioned by the majority of Europeans, 55%, but it was even greater number of Europe among older citizens and those living in rural areas of Europe, suggesting a lot has to be done on a European level with pension systems, the rural development programs, and we should possibly continue discussions on the universal basic income, as financial security is still a major concern for Europeans. Overall, free time is more important than financial issues, security or better living condition. This is also calling for policy changes and in consideration to introduce shorter working weeks on European level. More democracy would make citizens happier in countries where rule of law is facing challenges in the past years. So it's only a very few countries, but there a large amount of people believe that that more democracy would make them happier. We also asked the people what do they believe when they dream. We all also dream mostly about a better future for our children, and would they believe that the next generation will have a better quality of life in Europe than we had. Only 1 in 4 European citizens believe that the future generation will have actually a better life, but 1/3 believes the quality of life will be worse for the future generations. The good news is that the young people and pro-Europeans among those who are the optimists. The bad news is that in some countries, especially in the EU6, the founding members of our community, citizens have the dimmest view about the future quality of life. So this is a big concern in those 6 countries. We also try to see how to achieve our dreams. What do we believe? How can we achieve our dreams? The American dream, as Tamás introduced, was based on the promise that that if we work hard and follow the rules, we can reach the success and the prosperity we are dreaming about. EU Dream Survey showed that it's somewhat different right now in Europe. Only 1/3 believe that hard work or entrepreneurship can help them achieving the dreams. And another 1/3 believe that it's dominantly luck that can help them achieving their dreams. Countries with lower living standards but faster development rates were the ones where the majority of people believe that with work they can reach and fulfill their dreams. Once again, pessimism was greater in the EU6, and the big part of the population there is not even dream any longer about their future. And in certain countries, this number was extremely high among young people, young generations. So that's also a sort of warning sign for us about that we have to deal with on a policy level as well. Finally, we asked citizens about values. The founders dreamed about a democratic Europe, united around fundamental values, more freedom, dignity, equality, and rule of law. In the era of growing authoritarianism, this is an important question to see where we stand with these values. Do we believe in these values? I picked out of the 12 indicators three to very shortly introduce you. Most importantly, the way you pair democracy and autocracy. The good news is that democracy won by knockout. 78% of the respondents believe that they would rather choose democracy than autocracy. And but there was a small warning sign that this number is more than 10% lower among young people and people living in the capitals of these countries. Another bad news is that the majority of Europeans, although a slight majority, but they would sacrifice their freedom for more security. And this split was remarkably big among different demographic categories. Survey also showed that in countries where securitization is a major issue, where government is running campaigns to increase the fear of citizens, number of those who would sacrifice their freedom was significantly higher. Let me conclude my part with the last, where you, since it's Europe Day, I think it's very important to see where we stand with the identities. We give two options to choose from: national or European identity. Over 45% of the respondents choose European identity over national. And since UK was involved in the survey, this number now is closer to even European identity would won from the selection. The number is significantly higher. The number of those who have European identity have significantly higher among young people. It's over 57%. So it's crystal clear or it's not crystal clear actually, what is clearly the EU dream for everybody, but that is clear that for most of the citizens, EU is part of the dream. So that's a good news, I think, on this day today. Let me give now the floor to Tamás to continue the introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dániel. And let me continue with, let me continue with the fact that if we want to understand the dreams, we also must know the fears. So we also asked the EU citizens what are their biggest fears concerning the next 10 years of Europe. So what are the biggest challenges over the next 10 years in Europe? And apparently climate change and migration are Europe's biggest issues. More than 50% of the respondents said that climate change is a top concern for them. And climate change or global warming is not only very high on their agenda, but it's also seen that it is the most important issue in 5 countries and the second most important issue in all remaining countries. So we didn't have any country in our survey where climate change was not in the top 1 or top 2. However, number 2 issue is migration. Migration was also clearly deeply concerning and just 1 percentage point less than climate change. So these 2 issues are the most alarming ones, and we believe that they will stay on the European agenda in the next few years for sure. We also know that in the last few decades, Europe has witnessed a sharp rise in social and economic inequalities. Our surveys suggest that concern about these inequalities is the greatest in Southern Europe. So Spanish and Portuguese and French respondents all rank this issue among the top 3 concerns, also the Italian ones. So when we look for big concerns about inequalities, we should look to the south, where it's considered the biggest problem which Europe is facing. As now we know what citizens' expectations are on a European level, we also wanted to know where do citizens want to see their national governments invest more taxpayer money. So what are the priorities on the national level? And the good news for us is that our results show a clear preference for welfare spending. And we also see that there is a sensitivity to issues which predominantly affect the elderly, which is not a surprise seeing the aging society in Europe. Healthcare ranks at the top of citizens' priorities, with over half of respondents selecting this option. And especially it's a huge issue in Central and Eastern Europe. So Central and Eastern European countries, healthcare system desperately need public investment. Let me just show you one example that more than 80% of the Hungarians indicated that the Hungarian healthcare system deserves more money. So more than 80. Lagging just behind healthcare, we see pensions. 40% of the Europeans would like to see their governments spare more in this area. And it was very surprising for us that even citizens in traditional welfare states, such as Sweden or Germany, they also want their government to put more money in pensions. So if there is an untold story in Europe currently, or there is a problem which is maybe under the radar in some countries, this is definitely the pension system in these Western European and Northern European countries. And I would like to also mention education and environmental protection. These two issues also figured prominently. They were in the third and fourth place in our ranking. If we want to speak about dreams, or if we want to test big dreams, some people would say that there is a dream or even a utopia, which is called the universal basic income. So we wanted to test this big dream as well. And also surveys showed that there is a plurality of Europeans that support the idea of universal basic income. 46% agree with the idea, and while 29% is against it. So there is a plurality for UBI. And at the member state level, interestingly, the Germans are the most pro universal basic income. And the Portuguese are, the number in Portugal is the lowest, and also in some Central European countries. So we find also in our other findings that Portuguese and Central Europeans have a greater faith in the promise of hard work and entrepreneurship. And in some Western European countries, also especially Germany, this faith in hard work is much lower than the countries I mentioned beforehand. When we speak about dreams, we also would like to speak about money, but of course, our dreams are not always about money, but well, without money, it's very hard to dream. So we asked the citizens what their dream salary would be. What is the salary that enough for them for a comfortable living? And our survey showed that the European dream salary usually amounts twice the minimum wage of the given country. So if we see the legal standard for minimum wage in the given country and we double it, then we will receive the dream. Of course, there are differences. So for example, respondents in Eastern and Southern Europe assessed that they could lead a comfortable life with about 2.5 times the minimum wage. In Western Europe, it's more about 1.5 times the minimum wage. There are big differences, although not that big as we expected. For example, in France, the dream salary is net 2,200 euro per month per person. This is the highest, and which is actually twice as much as the dream salary for Hungary or Romania, where the dream salary is around 900 euro per person per month. So we see regional divisions as well. Well, so all in all, what is the European dream, you might ask, and what we learned about the whole project and the whole survey is that Europeans, especially Western Europeans, are pessimistic about the life chances for future generations. We also show and we also see a diminishing faith in the promise of hard work and achieve prosperity. To start with the bad news, we also see some changes in values such as homogeneity and security became as important as freedom and security and liberty. And we also see that, for example, the role of family has increased in this unpredictable world. So we see these changes in our survey. However, all in all, our survey reveals that the European dream is, well, actually Europe itself. So citizens don't want to move to other continent. They don't want to give up civil liberties. They don't want to give up democracy. We also see that Europeans want to strengthen the European welfare model. So they are not looking for other model, not the American, the Chinese or Russian models. So the European dream is Europe itself. However, it's not necessarily the Europe as it is today. If we would like to compare today's Europe and the Europe of three or 4 decades ago, we see that maybe Europeans would prefer that Europe. So they have some kind of nostalgia to the 1970s and the 1980s. So they want this kind of democratic Europe, but also Europe of welfare state. And most of all, they lack and they have a nostalgia towards a predictable and safe Europe, which they believe they had a couple of decades ago. So this stability and safety and predictability is what they actually lack. So in light of many uncertainties that attach to the future of Europe overall, we can assure you this continent remains the place of their dreams. And so we believe Europe is the European dream, and this is something that should inspire and inform all decision makers and all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tamás and Dániel, for this very exciting presentation. So under this positive note, I would also like to check how the folks are feeling back home before handing the floor to the Vice President for his keynote. So Tamás actually featured this question in his presentation. And so the FEPS team will be launching a poll online now for you. So make sure you're ready and no pressure there. So I believe that everyone can see it already. So we would like to ask you the question, which of the following do you think will be the biggest issues facing Europe over the next decade? No pressure there. So we just wanted to see how you feel about the biggest issues. We will give you a few minutes just to vote. So we have global warming, inequalities, migration, low wages and pensions, robotization and transformation of employment, or maybe none of the above. Wonderful. So I'm receiving indication from the FEPS team that you're voting. Very good. And so when the poll is over, we will display the results. 81% voted, I hear. Let's try to finish up to 100%. Thank you very much for voting. We just wanted to see the comparison. So the participants that are with us online, whether you also have the same impression as the EU14 that citizens that participated in the U-Dream survey. Thank you very much. And there we are. Global warming, 33%. Inequalities, 45%. Migration, okay. So here, Tamás, we see that our participants feel differently with regards to migration as one of the biggest issues facing Europe. And then we have 3% low wages and pensions, 10% robotization and transformation of employment, and last but not least, 5% none of the above. So we have also a couple of teasers with us, which is also all right. So thank you very much for having voted and for having engaged with us. So it's now my absolute pleasure and great honor you've given to FEPS Vice President to hand over the floor to you. So we have with us Maros Šefčovič, Vice President of the European Commission, responsible for interinstitutional relations and foresight. So thank you very much for being with us on the U-Dream report launch. And Vice President, among the many responsibilities that you have as you integrate the von der Leyen Commission, you have been entrusted to play an active role in the Conference on the Future of Europe and strengthening the European Commission's special partnership with the European Parliament. Now, as we've been seeing in the past few months, both the European Commission and the European Parliament have set the bar quite high in terms of the ambition with regard to the Future of Europe conference and its contribution to the European Commission's decision-making process. Is that not so? However, the Future of Europe conference preparations were well underway until, unfortunately, we were hit by the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and even today, 9th of May, Europe Day, this would be the day where the Future of Europe conference would have been launched, where perhaps physically most of the citizens would be participating in agoras. And as we see that this pandemic has posed an unprecedented challenge to European and global leaders, we would like also to reflect with you, Vice President. How much do you think the dreams and expectations of Europeans changed when it comes to what the Future of Europe initiative can and should deliver? Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Today is a beautiful weather, even here in Brussels, so I'm sure that all of us would prefer to be somewhere together when we can discuss these very important issues in person and launch this long-awaited debate with all Europeans, how to build better, more sustainable, greener, more resilient Europe. This was the plan, but unfortunately, as many other plans, this was prevented for now. I would like to underline by the COVID crisis. But nevertheless, first and foremost, I would like to thank Maria, Laszlo, and all this excellent team of the young people with whom I had the chance to chat a little bit before we started our webinar, for organizing this event anyway. I would say in these digital conditions, we've been joking a little bit that all of us had to go through the crash course in digital skills to simply manage to work in these new conditions, to use these new platforms and to be in touch, and most importantly, to deliver for the European citizens. So the 9th of May, as you know, is very symbolic date. I mean, it's now 70 years for the famous Schuman Declaration, and I would also underline that it's 75 years since the most horrific conflict, the most terrible conflagration of the mankind just ended, Second World War. Now you have a lot of documentaries on the TV which you can watch, and even though you know, I saw many of this film, still you are surprised by one side the barbarity of that conflict, and from other side the enormous distraction, but also the will of the people to prevent these horrors to happen in the future. And I think they responded to that horrors of the past by creating United Europe. And I think we should never forget that if we are celebrating the 75 years of peace, that this is actually the longest peaceful period that Europe ever had. Unfortunately, for the centuries, we've been fighting with each other. And now, thanks to our common European destiny, we work with each other, we collaborate, we cooperate, and we build, I believe, a better present and a better future. I also would like to underline the importance that we would proceed with the projects like we just have been presented by our two young researchers, by Tamás and Dániel. Because I think to understand our population, to listen more carefully to the young, middle-aged and elderly, is very important, because we see how the things are changing over the time, but at the same time how some trends are stable. And if we are talking about pandemic and about COVID-19, I think there is one consensus among all researchers, that if pandemia served for something, it was accelerator of already existing threats. From one side, the lockdown made sure that we never spent so much time with the closest family as before, and therefore the family values, which we so much underline in the report, are, I think, fully understandable. The people, they like quieter streets, they like bluer skies, cleaner air, cleaner waters, and we are all happy when we see new picture with the crystal clear water in Venice. So I think that this would be also very important for the future, because we have seen that what just a couple of weeks of stopped economy can do for the humanity, can do for our planet. Of course, we have to go back to work, we have to start to produce, but definitely there will be enormous pressure from our citizens to look for these new ways of working, for the new ways of delivering, for the more sustainable ways of producing the goods and services. And I think that very much goes in line with what the Europeans expect from the policymakers and decision makers for the future. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had a very dynamic, passionate discussions in the European Parliament and also within our socialist and progressive families in the Parliament, but I would say in all our member states, how to launch the conference on the future of Europe. And I remember, I know that Dominic is with us, we've been exchanging several papers on how to do it in the best possible way, how to engage the people, how to make sure that we would reach as many of them as possible. They would see that this is also their project, that they would feel the ownership for common European destiny. Of course, a couple of weeks later, we've been in totally different situation, which I also think already impacted a little bit that survey, which we just did a minute before I started my introductory remarks. I think that first moments of the crisis after the initial shock through which all the member states, including the European Commission, had to go through, we had to focus on something super dramatic, saving the lives of our people, saving the lives of patients, saving the lives of health professionals, making sure that borders are open for the supplies of goods and medical equipment, the things which we've been taken for granted for years and years, and suddenly we had to fight for them. After that, we very quickly realized that with the lockdown, what should be the next big challenge is how to save as many jobs as possible. And we had to come up with the solutions like this SURE scheme, which should help the member states to preserve as many jobs as possible simply by allowing the companies to keep the people on the payroll during the confinement period. And I believe that this would be very important for the future, for the relaunch of the economy, because our people would be still in the job. You know that we have high qualified labor force, and I think it would be huge difference between us and, for example, Americans, when we see how the jobless rate is spiraling up, because I believe that our people would be ready and would be prepared to start to work immediately once the epidemiological criteria would allow it. And now we are in a phase where we are working very hard on relaunching the economy. And I think that here again, this would be one of the tests, maybe as Maria Joao just said before our conference, the biggest test for Europe yet, because never since the European Union was created, we've been facing such a drop of GDP, 7.5% in a couple of months. Of course, there is also a promise and expectations, if we do things right, that we can jump back very quickly to the rapid growth next year, even though it will take some time to level it up, but we have to do it right. So therefore, I hope that in the coming weeks, we will come with very ambitious remedy to how to relaunch Europe and how to fight the problems which our participants understood that is the most important right now, fight inequalities. Because simply we see that some of the countries can, let's say, fuel much more money through the state aid into the economy than the others. And we do not want the result of this crisis being that we would have even bigger divergence among the member states or in between the regions. And that we would simply have a group of the regions or the countries or the people who would be left behind. It's definitely against the policy priorities of our political family. And I think that we very well understand this imperative also in the European Commission. Therefore, we want to have adapted to the crisis new multi-annual financial framework proposal, which, as all of you know, is the proposal for the 7 years budget. And in addition to that, we want to use the high rating of the European economy for creating the recovery fund, which could help us to inject enormous amount of money into the European economy to relaunch and to do it in, I would say, the new way. Because when we looked through the survey, it was quite clear how people value the environment, how people are relying more and more, as we do right now, on the digital infrastructure, and how we do not want to be surprised anymore by the fact that in some, for example, medical products, we are so heavily dependent on the imports from some faraway countries in Asia. Therefore, we would like to make sure that the investments which we are currently preparing would be channeled in a forward manner, that it would allow us to bounce our economy forward, that would be greener, more sustainable, that it would be future oriented, based on the progressive and modern digital infrastructure, and that we would pay much more attention to the resilience, not only for the health sector, but also to have more closer look at global value chains, where we can still afford to have flying in the spare parts or the different critical materials from far abroad, or where we need maybe to look for diversification, as we had to do with the energy supplies just a couple of years ago, and diversify our suppliers, diversify also the countries of origin or companies which are so crucial for our economy, or where we would decide that this particular product we better produce also in Europe because it's of critical importance. So all this, I believe, would make our Europe much more stronger, resilient, greener, and more modern. And I think that because of this crisis, all these trends which been somehow lingering in our thinking, which been somehow being postponed for later, be now accelerated and presented in much more vivid manner, and therefore also our citizens would definitely expect much more robust resolutions to all these challenges which are ahead of us. I think that what would be also the challenge in the coming weeks, months, and years, because I think that fight against inequalities and making sure that all this transition from the old into the new economy, from the current hibernation to the launching of the economy, would be done as a fair, as a just transition, and in a way where we would offer all kinds of possibilities to our people, that nobody would really be left behind. I am not surprised, because I have also 3 children, and I talk to them a lot about that pessimism which is there, that maybe this is the first generation of the young people which doesn't believe that they would be better off than their parents. And I think that the worries come from the climate change, from the complexity of this world, and also the challenges they face, because they know very well that if it comes to the labor market, the top 10 professions of today didn't exist just 5 years ago. So for them, it means that they will have to be working on their skills all their life. They will be constantly pushed to learn something new, to manage new technologies, to adjust into the new environment. And it's very demanding. I think all of us who are working now on this digital platform, we know how challenging it is to be permanently focused and to talk to the screen instead of to the real people. So therefore, that push for having a little more free time for hobbies, for family, for friends, I fully understand that, and I think it will have to be part of the new European social model. I believe that all these topics, which are so crucial, I think would be excellent feature for the conference on the future of Europe, because I believe that people want to discuss them. people want to tell us what they expect from the policymaker and decision makers. And I think they want to be part of that search for better European future and really to be involved in this exchange among themselves and with us. And I think it's our duty to make sure that we would allow them and we would make sure that as many Europeans as possible would participate in that. I would like to reassure you that if it comes to the European Commission, that our commitment to the conference remains unshakable. I think European Parliament and the Commission already adopted how ambitious we want to be in these debates. As you know, we're still waiting for the decision of our member states on the Council, how we will launch it together, because it will have to be very well organized and concerted effort. And I believe that once the conditions would permit that, we would proceed with the conference as quickly as possible. And I believe that also this type of interactions would be very useful, because many people we will not be able to reach personally, but through the digital platforms and the discussions like we have today, it should be possible. If you allow me to conclude on the European dream, I would use the phrase which I found in your report, and I very much like it, not only because it was written by a very good friend of mine, Jeremy Rifkin, but because I think it's very well reflects today's reality. Jeremy Rifkin has said that the American dream may be worth dying for. The new European dream is worth living for. And I think these are very powerful words. This is what distinguishes us Europeans from anybody else. This is why we are such an attraction magnet for many societies and many people outside Europe who like how we cooperate, who appreciate our social model, and who I believe keep fingers crossed that Europe would play even more active, more positive role in the global affairs. And therefore, I will just wish to all of us happy Europe Day. And I'm very much looking forward to the discussions and to the questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice President, for sharing your reflection today on Europe Day. You started with reminding us of the special importance that this day entails, 75 years of peace, the challenge now that the European Commission, that Europe's policymakers are facing now in the response to the COVID pandemic, the healthcare response, the economic response. So the plan that the European Commission and the Progressive Family have at hand to address these, and most importantly, to come closer to citizens' expectations, these issues that have been reflected in the European Dream survey, in the European Dream report, could very well feature the discussions on the future of Europe. So thank you very much, Vice President, for your insights. And for our participants online, you're very lucky, because Vice President Maros Sefcovic has conveyed that you would be happy to take 1-2 questions. As time is running out, unfortunately, we will just have time for 1 question. And from the registrations, we also believe that we have a question coming from Portugal. So perhaps the FEPS team can also then launch the question here online so that the Vice President can reply.
Hi, hello. Thank you, Vice President, and also thank you to FEPS and to Policy Solutions for this important report. My name is Mafalda Damazovinhas. I'm from Portugal. You mentioned your children. And my question is exactly about young European citizens. Their life trajectories, our life trajectories, they've been and they will continue to be profoundly transformed by the consequences of the financial crisis, now COVID, and also climate change. And so a career, a good life, a stable environment are increasingly unlikely dreams for many of these citizens, unfortunately. And so my question is, how can the EU minimize as much as possible the impact of this crisis on the lives of millennials and Generation Z, and therefore guaranteeing that they will also continue to enjoy the European dream? That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mahra, for this question, because I think that would be the question, not only this Commission, but I believe that the whole European Union would have to find the right answer to in this coming decade. So if you allow just a few very quick reflections, I think that our paramount principle should be to build fair society. We have to offer fair chance the young generations to get high quality education. And I think that we also have to be very fair with our young people to point them at the appropriate time, what type of education, what type of specializations is the, let's say, most perspective from the perspective of the labor market, and also to give the young people, I would say, second chance in adding up the new skills they would need to find even better positions on the labor market. As I said, unfortunately, your generation would be faced with this permanent challenge to upgrade your skills, to learn new things, to adapt to the new ways, with especially digital, but also green transformation will bring to our lives. And I think that fairness should be also absolutely crucial if it comes to such a things like pay. I mean, we in Europe are struggling for years to have the equality and the pay transparency, especially if it comes between male and female workers. And we are also, as the European Commission, preparing very clear position and clear proposals in that respect, because I think that as a father of two daughters and one son, I also see it as a father that how challenging it is, especially for young female workers to be fairly remunerated very often for the same job as my colleagues do. So therefore, I think that the fairness in how we are rewarding the work must be there. And the third step would be also we have to make sure that once you are becoming to the pension age, that you should be able to have very decent life because you devoted your entire working career to help the society, to be part of the European nations, actually achieve enormously lot if you look at how Europe looks now and how was it 30-40 years ago. So I think that fairness, that would be one of the elements for which we all have to push for. And then of course the modernity, and also making sure that we as Europeans will stand tall if it comes to this increased geopolitical competition. As I was already saying a few times in the past, I am strong believer in our absolute determination, which we have to demonstrate that not only now, but also in post-2030 world, Europe would belong among the top 3 economies. Why? Because it would allow us to project our values globally, because it would allow us to work and make sure that this planet is a better place, because we need this commitment of Europe to better planet, to multilateral solutions, and also to make sure that the more affluent ones would take care also of the countries which are struggling because they are still going through development stage, and also to have a strong economy is a guarantee that we could further develop our European social model. So this would be just some of the thoughts which I would offer right now. But your question is absolutely relevant one, and I'm sure it would be discussed in all fora, in all agoras we would meet, because to set it right, to find the right answers would also determine how the Europe would look like in the coming decades. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice President, for your insightful reply on the millennial generation and future prospects. To Mafalda, I'm pretty sure she's thankful for that that reply. I'm really, really sorry to all of the other participants. I see that you're very engaged, and please continue doing so. But nevertheless, we have to slowly proceed with our program. And also before handing over the floor to FEPS President, Maria João Rodrigues, for a reflection on the Vice President's remarks, I would just kindly like, and our participants online, sorry for this moment, but we would like to invite all of the speakers that are participating in the UDream webinar just to have your camera on for a brief family picture. This would take only 1 minute, exactly, with a big smile, as the Vice President is making. Voila, I think it should be all right now. Thank you for your patience. Once again, Vice President, on behalf of FEPS and Policy Solutions, a great thanks for your time, your engagement today. And without further ado, I will then hand over the floor to FEPS President Maria João Rodrigues, that will also share her vision, her progressive vision on the future of Europe and the role of our progressive family in it. So over to you, FEPS President.
Maria, many thanks, and good morning, everybody. This is just great that we find a way to be together in this special day. And we know that the 9th of May is for us to celebrate European Union as a very special construction, but also to project our dreams about what should be the European Union. So from this viewpoint, we are extremely grateful to the vision, to the commitment showed by Vice President Maroš Šefčovič, because it shows that he's the right person in the right place. We need to have someone like him in an extremely important role inside the European Commission, have in his hands the coordination of the Commission work program and the interface with the European Parliament, as well the preparation of the upcoming Conference on the Future of Europe. So Maroš, many thanks for your very strong inspiration for all of us. Look, we have in our hands the outcomes of this survey, and we could see there are differences between countries, between generations, but all in all, we could also conclude that Europeans, they remain clearly pro-European. And this is a very important value we need to build on. Now, the problem we have is that we are right now confronted with probably the biggest test to European integration since World War II. And this COVID crisis is just at the beginning, and with implications in all fronts: the health, social, the economic, the financial, the political, the external. And we know that we have big choices. We know that if we just go moving through step by step, but very low key, there is a real risk of fragmenting Europe. Because then those who take a populist, nationalist viewpoint will use the opportunity to see, well, let's go back to national borders to protect our interests. So the danger is there. And that's why we need to be bold on the solutions we need to put on the table. They are being discussed right now, as Maroš Šefčovič identified one by one. And we believe that progressive forces, they need to be outspoken now, because we have in our hands exactly the future of the European project. And we believe, and I very much agreed with Maroš, that the starting point for us is a strong sense of fundamental rights for European citizens, starting with what is a healthy life. Because now we fully understand what is the value of healthy life. And healthy life for us is not only for humankind, it's also for our relationship with the nature, environment, and the planet. So we need to start from this. And then we are right now fighting to save lives, but also to save jobs. And we need powerful instruments to save jobs in order to avoid a downward spiral, bringing down economic activities and our living conditions. That's why a recent instrument referred by Maros Sefcovic as the SURE is a very important initiative because it's saving jobs and saving people when they can keep their jobs. This is extremely important. But this is not all. And Maros is completely right. This is the moment for us to imagine our future for the next phase. And the recovery plan should pave the way for this. We are understanding now on a massive scale that we cannot just go to the past. We need to change the way we live. And so the Green Deal, the digital transition should be fully used to change the way we live and should be translated in more and better jobs. And then Maros is also right that we have a big issue in the international arena because European Union must remain a key global actor working all the others for better standards all over the world when dealing with COVID and when pushing for sustainable development goals and ensuring peace and security. So we need a strong European Union. And I think the survey, by the way, the poll we just have done now online is proving this clearly, that we have a clear wish for a strong Europe to cope with climate change and to provide something which is no longer with social inequalities. So all in all, this is a very roadmap for the upcoming conference on the future of European Union. We need to envisage big innovations in the available financial instruments and institutional frameworks. We are inventing something like a European Treasury. We are discussing about issuing common bonds to finance our budget. We are discussing about the role of European taxation. So these are big innovations. And we are very glad as European Foundation to welcome all the key actors pushing for this conference on Europe. We have with us the two most proeminent members of the European Parliament too. And so you can count on us. And this will be crucial to keep the European dream alive. So I hand it over to you, Maria.
Thank you very much, FEPS President, for that reflection. And indeed, we have a very exciting lineup of speakers just coming to you now, participants. So make sure you stay online and prepare your questions. So now we're entering into a fishbowl conversation. And so what does this mean? So let's imagine that we have all of our speakers sitting in a podium in the moon shape. And they are here looking for your answers, for your questions, and eager to provide answers. So we have with us, as FEPS President conveyed, two members of the European Parliament with us, MEP Gabi Bischoff from Germany, MEP Dominic Ruiz de Veza from Spain. We also have Anja Skrpček, Director of Research and Training at FEPS. And last but not least, Elisa Lironi, Senior Manager on Democracy Projects from the European Citizens Action Service. So how this fishbowl will run is that it will run fast. This is also for allowing a bit of more dynamics and interaction with you too. So I will be posing specific questions to our fishbowl speakers, and they will only have 5 minutes to reply. And after that, we will open for Q&A. And here we really are thankful for all of the engagement that you have been doing online in our chat box. And we will be conveying your questions for a last round to our fishbowl speakers. So I hope everyone is ready, that everyone is fired up. And now especially to Gabi, who is our first fishbowl speaker, and Gabi, besides being a member of the European Parliament from the S&D group from Germany, Gabi is also vice chair of the AFCO committee in the European Parliament. And so Gabi, I hope you're ready for our first question. So as one of the European Parliament's lead policymaker on the future of Europe, what challenges do you see in making the Parliament's voice and ambitions heard in the process in the Future of Europe conference? Over to you, Gabi.
Thank you very much. And let me thank you for the survey you did, because I think this is an important work in the preparation of the conference, because I'm absolutely convinced that we really need to reconnect more with the European dream the fathers and mothers of Europe had, and to have the courage they had to change Europe, to reform it in a way that how we have to do it. Because what we can see is with business as usual, we will not be able to put Europe back on track, to have a new beginning. And this is what we really fight for as progressives here. And the Parliament from the beginning was in the leading seat, because for years it was, many members were fighting for such a conference, for an opportunity to involve in a broad sense citizens and reconnect them with the European dream, and giving them a possibility to also help to shape the future of Europe and the future they want. Therefore, I think it's also very interesting when we see the priorities people in this survey gave to certain issues. And for us, it was very essential, and this is why we drafted this first proposal, very ambitious, saying we want to create the possibility of many European marketplaces, as Maros said, agoras, where European citizens meet. At the moment, and in the past, we have a lot of national debates of citizens, but we can see that it is very essential to have a European perspective, and not only on the 9th of May, but the whole year. And with this innovative concept, not only to create speakers' corners, but to say the proposals, these agoras that work on different issues. And it's very much alike the priorities that were set in your survey, with the proposals that also the institutions and the institutional panel has to deal with these proposals. So not only, okay, you can come up with proposals, but then you will never know what happened to them. But really to have a concept where we have on one hand the institutional debates and panel, and on the second different citizens agoras, and also a youth agora, because we think for the future of Europe, we need also the special view of young people in Europe. That we will have feedback loops with the institutional panel on the recommendations of the citizens, and give a feedback what was taken on board, what was left out. What we can see at the moment is some of the institutions and institutional actors are afraid of such an open process. And they rather would have something that is easier, I would say, to control. But I think this openness and having really a mirror of society debating. So we want not the same discussing the future of Europe. We want that the nurse, the teacher, the factory worker, the delivery guy, the self-employed, that these people selected randomly reflect the whole variety of our societies, because we need this experience of the people, we need their view to shape the future of Europe. And with this, we think we reconnecting to the European dream, and what you can see is citizens think it's worth trying it now. And they desperately look for a way out of these multiple crises we have. And if we come back to us as social democrats, and coming back to your survey, the success of social democratic parties from their beginning in Europe was always that we gave people hope for the future, that their life would be better in the future. And this is something that we have to achieve again for all of Europe. that not only the young people, but everyone sees that we will all have a better future together in the European Union, and that if you have your individual dreams, however they might be, Europe will help you to deliver. And I think with this kind of optimism, we will achieve it only if we dare to go different ways. And this is why I hope that the Council, which is at the moment still the institution, as in many other areas, that cannot agree on a joint position and which is most reluctant at the moment for this. So I hope that what Maria Rodriguez said, this might be the biggest test we ever had, will give them the courage to come up with a position so that the three institutions can agree on an innovative, inclusive, and participatory approach.
Thank you very much, Gabi. So a very concrete plea for more openness, transparency, and for Europe to dare more. Thank you very much. So now, next, we have Dominic Ruiz de Veza, member of the European Parliament and coordinator of the AFCO committee in the S&D group. So Dominic is, I believe, joining us from Spain. So our question for you is the following. So Dominic, what sort of opportunities do you see for our political family to have a strong role, even not the leading role, in the future of Europe debate and conference? Dominic, over to you.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you as well to FEPS, to Maria Joao and Laszlo for the invitation. And I'm very happy to participate and very thankful because FEPS is organizing this at a very timely moment. The 70th anniversary of the Schuman Declaration, it's today, so we couldn't be more timely. And also when we are trying to direct our energy to launch the debate on the future of Europe, as Gabi explained very well. She's been working hard, and she continues to work hard, particularly on the modalities of the conference. But she's also, as myself, a member of the AFCO committee, and she's very knowledgeable on the content on the conference as well. And she was very active with me and other members of our working group in drafting the position paper of our working group on the future of Europe, which sets a clear vision for a stronger political union in Europe. And that goes to your question. I think we have had perhaps a tendency in the past as a political family to speak a lot about the content of our policies, particularly in terms of course, education, health, employment. But at the same time, we need to play a strong role in the institutional agenda. And that's where, as you said, we should play not only a strong role, but in my view and in our view, from the AFCO working group of the S&D group, a leading role, because the two agendas go hand in hand. You could see our constitution, the current constitutional framework, from two perspectives: the perspectives of the content of our common policies, and from the perspective of the procedures, and both are very much related. The last time we started a debate, official debate on the future of Europe, was 2 decades ago. Think about that. Think about how the world has changed in 2 decades. It was in the Nice summit, after a very difficult and disheartening process of agreeing to the Nice Treaty, that the leaders in 2000 decided to launch the debate on the future of Europe. That was followed by the Laeken Declaration in 2001, and then the Convention in 2002, and then the Constitution in 2004, that ended up being the Lisbon Treaty in 2007. The Lisbon Treaty entered into force in 2009. Think again how much the world had changed in just those 10 years in terms of acceleration of climate change, migration flows, geopolitics, Trump, Brexit, of course, the rise of China as a geopolitical actor, not just as a commercial actor. And now, of course, the last straw in these epochal changes of what we can call the Lisbon decade is the pandemic. The pandemic is just the last challenge that we add to a pile of challenges that have been building up in the last 10 years. And now we have to enter in what I will call the post-Lisbon decade. And to enter the post-Lisbon decade, of course, we have to switch and improve some of our policies. The recovery plan is the priority in the short term. Maros has talked about that, Mana Joao as well, so I will not get into that. But in addition to our actions in the short term, we should be the strong recovery plan, you know, with funded with a union issuance of long-term bonds and spent through the community framework. We also have to think about updating our constitutional framework. And I said before, we have contents, but if you look at the Lisbon Treaty, which is a very good treaty by all means, and it was a big shift from what we had before. We extended qualified majority voting, we increased the number of policy areas in which the EU is active, but still 10 years have passed. And back then, climate change was mentioned only once in the entire treaty. And of course, no mention of objectives or climate neutrality or anything of the sort, or a Green Deal for that matter. The social pillar is still underdeveloped in our treaty. We have the European Pillar of Social Rights. As a socialist family, we have to fight for this pillar to be in our constitutional framework. And now also we need a public health union. It's very obvious. So those are the contents. But alongside, we also need to improve our procedures because they are not fast enough, they are not effective enough, and they are not democratic enough. Our parliament still is not sufficiently powerful when it comes to the revenue side of the budget. We don't have co-decision when it comes to taxation. Our role in foreign policy is still below what a normal national parliament will be able to do. And of course, unanimity is still very much applied in key matters in council, like foreign policy. Even to agree to a simple foreign policy declaration, you need unanimity, and one single country can veto, like Hungary did, for example, when he vetoed a joint declaration with the Arab League because the Hungarian government didn't want the word migration mentioned in the communique. So we really have to tackle those issues, and we have to open a new constitutional phase now, using the Conference on the Future of Europe, of course, that we have to push for it, and open this post-Lisbon era in the European Union.
Thank you very much, Dominic, for your contribution. Also very much in the same line as Gabi, more ambition. Let's think of institutional reform. It's high time for that. Thank you very much. So now the next fishbowl speaker that we have in line is Elisa Lironi. So Elisa, you are here in this panel as a representative of the NGO dimension. And we would like to ask you, Elisa, do you welcome the European Commission's initiative on the future of Europe? Or do you think it's more of, a repackaging exercise of an earlier initiative that will lead perhaps to citizens' disappointment? What do you think, Elisa?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me. My name is Elisa, as you mentioned, and I work for the European Citizen Action Service, which is an NGO based here in Brussels. And our mission is to empower citizens' rights. And we have two focus areas, which is one, European democracy, which I'm managing, and another one on EU rights issues. So, of course, before the situation of the COVID, we were very much working together with other NGOs in Brussels and also beyond Brussels. I was personally working also with youth organizations in order to develop the youth agoras. And of course, since my expertise lies in the digital democracy sphere, I was also very much advocating with ICAS a stronger digital democracy sphere in the conference. Yes, there is, of course, a few different challenges in running the Conference on the Future of Europe. Unfortunately, of course, everything has been postponed Now with the situation, we're still waiting for the position of the council. But in any case, I think that it is important to repeat a bit, like, what are the important things that we should ensure in the implementation of the Conference of the Future of Europe. So our proposal as civil society organizations was to make sure that this process would be a strong one, a solid one, combining offline elements such as the agoras, together with a strong online component in order to reach out even more to different countries in the EU. And we had also worked on a sort of procedure in which, you know, you would have a first preparation and setup phase to make sure that you have a good, solid infrastructure in order to tackle the few years in which you are receiving citizens' contributions. And then we would open up, for example, an online digital platform to try to reach out to as many EU citizens as possible for identification of, for example, the policies that they would like to talk about. Of course, it is unclear if these policies will come from, at least the subjects of the policies will come from only the EU institutions, but I've also been in touch with some officials of the Commission who were also open to, you know, proposing maybe some subjects which could be included in a future treaty. So, and this is also still under negotiation, and it's not really sure how this would work. But I think that the first phase would be really important. It would be really important to include citizens in also, you know, discussions which are not only decided by policymakers, but also subjects that they could propose and that they think are important for their daily lives. And then we would have this kind of, you know, divergent, convergent phase, in which the third phase would be the ideation process, in which you would have, for example, offline events, the agoras and the youth agoras, in which these policy subjects would be discussed more in depth. And I really stress also the importance of having experts, universities, think tanks, and people who could also be mediators of these processes. And also civil society organizations could help with the awareness raising and making sure that the process is always outreaching citizens as much as possible. And here it was proposed a very good method of the random representative samples, in which, you know, you would maybe start off with citizens using a digital platform, but then having random representative samples participating in the agoras. And then there should be an evaluation phase, of course, with the EU decision makers, but also with universities, NGOs, and also other actors. Why not? The most important thing here is about the feedback and the impact, which is the last phase, to make sure that citizens are aware of where their contributions are going to, and making sure that there is political willingness since the beginning that these contributions will actually bring some sort of impact to the policy. Because the problem is that if this doesn't happen, it will bring a lot of frustration to citizens. And we've seen this, for example, with the citizens' dialogues a few years ago. So I would say that the main three things that one has to be careful on in the process is, first of all, accessibility, making sure that there's awareness raising, making sure that all of these platforms are user-friendly, making sure that the agoras are well known and also their results. The second thing is representativeness. And here there's the suggestion of representative samples and the online-offline combination. And the third one is the impact and feedback. And this comes from results of research done on other participatory democracy methods. So it's really important that these three elements are, you know, complied with in order to have a good process.
Thank you very much, Elisa. So it was a very comprehensive presentation on the innovations that we've seen now, what the European institutions are having in mind with the Future of Europe conference and process, also with some, reflections on what should be important for policymakers to keep in mind. This was also mentioned by Gabi. Let's not forget what citizens contribute. They should understand and follow where the contribution is being pursued, is being put into the feedback it gets. So thank you very much. So our last fishbowl speaker, and thank you very much for all of our participants online for sticking with us. We are clearly beyond the time that we initially foresaw for this webinar, but hoping that you're enjoying your Saturday with us. So next in line, I have Anya Skripczek, our colleague, FEPS Director for Research and Training. And Anya, the following question that I have for you is, you are the lead academic and the brain actually behind the Spitzenkandidat process. So do kindly explain what it is about to our listeners, because perhaps not everybody knows about this. And in your opinion, what should be the progressive vision on the future of Europe? And what should progressives do to enable a more political and participatory Europe? Over to you, Anya.
Well, thank you very much, Maria, and good afternoon, everyone. Not at all any pressure after such an introduction. Thank you so much. I think it is actually amazing, and I'd like to thank all the speakers, but also the authors of the report, because those are particularly gloomy and bizarre and terrifying times. And to celebrate the Day of Europe, and I think that some of the questions go precisely to that direction. How can we celebrate it together? And we celebrate through this debate. Natasha and Alexandra pointing to that. This is amazing to speak about EU dream instead, to take this step back and think, what is the dream? What is the aspiration? What do we want this Europe to be about? Because on a daily basis, we always talk, and everyone, loving Europe or not loving Europe, talks about what to improve or what to change, but this sort of like, what is the dream? What is the ideal is actually frequently skipping our imagination. Now, I would say, and the report points that out in its broad diversity, that there are many answers to that. Now, some summary of the report, and Tamás also spoke about that, says, well, the dream is the Europe itself. I think that this answer, as simple as it might be, is also very complex. So bearing in mind that all of you have stayed with us for over 1 hour to celebrate Europe's Day with us, I'd like you to take a moment to think by yourself. And I'm evidently, while talking, I'm seeing predominantly myself and the other speakers. So I'd like everyone who is connected, because we are connected, to take a moment in front of your screens and think, what is the European dream for me? If you were to ask me, it connects with a particular experience. In 2003, before my country, Poland, has been able to join the European Union, we had to hold referendum. And together with my colleagues, we got together, and out of the old boxes, we made a big postcard where we said, we are going to win this referendum. We are going to win the future of our country. And we went on the street, and during a market time, we started asking citizens to sign it. Why does it connect with me for the European dream? Because it was an absolutely absurdly idealistic action, trying to get people to mobilize, trying to tell them, we as young people, we have a dream, we want to be in the European Union, and it has been extremely participatory. And believe me, 17 years after, I still can smell the chestnut tree blossoming, and what sort of excitement it brought to be able to talk about being part of the European Union. So when today we are talking about the Future of Europe conference, and both Gabi and Dominic, who are the praetorians of a progressive fight when it comes to what the Future of Europe debate should be about, and how we should make it different to every other debate that we had that were responding to the aspirations of the generation, I do think that there are 3 points to take into consideration to respond to your question, Maria, how to make it more political and more participatory. The first one is the question of EU governance. And Maria João Rodrigues was talking about the transformative character of the crisis, and Vice President Šefčovič was saying about how the COVID exacerbated things that we've already known about, but we got an extra impulse to sort of get active on them. And I think that in that sense, the European governance, and the joint resolution talks about it, is about the capacity to act. And this capacity to act is about the capacity to deliver. When we look at the report of ours, there is a clear distinction between those who believe that it's Europe of nations who should deliver and those who are talking about the federalistic approach. And I think Alexandra and the others asking the questions in the background are going to be probably on my side when I say that I'm a convinced and passionate federalist on that sense, which is also why I do think that there are certain benchmarks which the Future of Europe conference should set up and return to transnational list. If you allow me, this moment of sort of advertisement here should be one of the benchmarks. But I think that what this joint resolution, when it comes to the EU governance, the effectiveness, the question of preservation of democracy, which we saw in the report, is the leading value. What we really need to think about is how we also restore trust in Europe, because we also see that Europeans trust Europe, but they not necessarily and not always do trust the people who are leading that. And that's something to be learned for all of us when we talk about making changes. The second thing which connects with that is a question of leadership. And I think in the background, Lucas and Nigel have been clearly arguing that we need to have a strong leadership to put the social agenda on board. I believe that our President and Secretary General, who have been key actors when it comes to bringing social Europe on board, would agree with that. But I would say that we need actually more these days. We do have different temporary mechanisms now in place, things that even 3 months ago, nobody would have thought were possible. Sure was one of them. The discussion about the basic income guarantee is another. The question of dominant ideas, how to deal with the inequalities when it comes to gender, and what the Vice President mentioned, the question of climate change. These are all the things that we need to preserve, but there again, there is a massive benchmark, and this is where we have to show that not only on the level of principle, but also on the level of action, we can make Future of Europe about united Europe in action. And here the budgetary issues, the multi-annual financial framework is definitely a test where we will have to see. By the way, when the Europe is discussing budget, and we've been discussing for many, many years, the issue of budgetary capacity, there is also something to be said about asking citizens how they think that the budget of the European Union might be spent. It's not a massive novelty. We do have the citizens' participatory budgets on the local and possibly sometimes also experiments on the national level, something to be thinking about. And last but not least, I think that, you asked me about participation, and what comes from the report, and the report is very strong on that. Citizens want to have a greater say. No wonder. When I was painting my postcard 17 years ago, I wanted to have a say about Future of Europe and about the future of my country. And here I think the very important point is the one about trust in institution, but much of a different, in fact, distrust in the political parties, something the Euro parties absolutely have to pick up. I think, we are on a good level. The EU Spitzenkandidat process, when the Euro parties nominated the leading candidate, is a good way, but there's much more. There's much more to be done when it comes to manifestos, but also in terms of the nomination of the different commissioners. We as progressives are in a unique position this time, because we have a lot of commissioners really placed in a key positions to deliver, but that's something we do on behalf of the citizens, and something that citizens probably are not that informed about. Of course, Spitzenkandidat is the beginning of the process, but I would say that we need to continue, and we need to also discuss about politicization and how the political process is run. When it comes to consultation, and Gabi was very strong on that, talking about how the consultation should run, and Elisa gave us a bit of a kitchen view about, okay, how does it translate to running consultations? I'm locked in my place as much as you are all. So the only consultation I can run is probably only with the member of my families just now, or via the different seminars. But what I would say, and what is important, is that we use this momentum to also think how we can run the consultations in a different way. Because getting people to the meeting is already anticipating very often that those people are interested and they have time to participate in those different consultations. What I would argue for is that we should build on a diversity of different inputs about the future of Europe. We talk about child union. Why not to ask children to even draw what they think the future of Europe should be about? When we come to the youth, of course, we have the European Youth Forum, we have the Youth Agoras. But why not to look at the youth initiatives? We had so many transversal and changing demonstrations even last year, which made us take the climate change much more seriously than we would have done. So maybe looking at different youth initiatives and what is being discussed by the youth is also a way to proceed. And last but not least, I think that it is a very important thing that we also look at how to include those who very often do not have a voice. I think Alexander was asking about the question of voting in the different elections, but even before voting, it's about being able to connect. And here I talk about migrants, here I talk about disabled, here I talk about the elderly who might not be as us following this discussion today, and being able to connect via screens in the same way we do. So those three things, the issue of EU governance, how we make Europe deliver, and how we change our institutions, but with the objective to deliver, how we show the leadership in setting a proper social agenda that people feel that they are represented and that they dream is something that we have. And last but not least, the question of how we bring people to be part of this process and not only respondent would be my three sort of suggestions. And when it comes to Europe, I think this report shows one very important thing. We have a lot of divides, and there are lengthy examples of how in the different political discussions we split on different issues. But I think unity, when it comes to solidarity, and it has been shown by European citizens many times, unity is actually a personal and collective sensation. So what I think is that whilst Tamás and Dániel's survey is showing very clearly that people are proud to be Europeans, that they wouldn't move to a different continent. Well, maybe they would move to the different country, but that's also what Europe is about. I would say that our job in this Future of Europe conference is to set the barrier higher, not only to make them proud as European, but make them proud as European citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anya, and also super thanks for making reference to some of the questions that have been popping up in our chat box. Thank you so much for all of those questions. Here, I would suggest, and also giving notice to our speakers, we will give a very last round, and I'll be asking you one very specific question, but I'll also revert to the chat box. Some of the questions that Anya, at least in her remarks, did not touch upon, but here just making sure that our participants are aware that yes, FEPS will relay these questions to our speakers via Twitter, via the EU Dream chat. We have questions from Dennis, from Alexandra, from Lucas on just a quick example on how do we create a more unified and cohesive European Union? What about a Europe of welfare states? I have here my chat box full of questions, but we are really running out of time. And I would also like to thank you all very much for your patience and participation in this process. And so I was particularly struck by one question that Anya raised that was addressed to our panelists, but that actually we will address them also to you, to our participants back home. What is your European dream? So Anya sparked this question amongst the other panelists. So I will go in turn by the program, asking you individually, our speakers, what is your European dream? And in three words, 1 minute each, as we need to slowly wrap up this insightful webinar. So Gabi, what is your European dream? Tell us.
My dream is very easy, that every person, independent of sex, age, gender, whatever, is able, according to her abilities, to have a good future in Europe.
Thank you, Gabi. Dominic, you're up next. Dominic, I'm not sure if you're listening to us, or maybe you will revert back on your European dream to our participants. Then Elisa, tell us what your European dream is.
Okay, I mean, this is a very difficult question, but since Gabi gave such a good answer, I can't say the same thing, of course. So I think that at this particular moment, I wish to see more European solidarity amongst the different nation states, and a future, and I would say more of an EU dream, more than a European dream would be to see a European Union which has not only more solidarity, but also a stronger political environment, and not only an economic project, but more of a political project, and that we can really work together to have a stronger European Union and counter populist arguments and fake news around it, because I've been seeing it a lot through the coronavirus situation.
Thank you very much, Elisa. Anya, I won't refer back to you again because you shared very much your experience of 17 years ago. So I would like to thank very, very much our keynote speakers, FEPS president, our fishbowl speakers for this very exciting discussion on European dreams and the future of Europe. We won't even make the attempt to summarize this discussion of today. It will be made available in FEPS YouTube, FEPS websites, and so on. And now we are coming close to our end of this webinar, the European Dream webinar. And so without further ado, I have the pleasure to invite FEPS Secretary General Laszlo Andor for the concluding remarks of this webinar. Thank you very much.
Maria, congratulations for organizing this fascinating discussion. And first of all, I would like to congratulate the presenters, Tamás and Dániel, for this excellent survey, to thank Vice President Šefčovič for coming to speak with us, the panelists for the interventions, and the entire FEPS team which organized this event. I think this event displayed FEPS at its best, because we have seen an empirical survey which presented to us the reality of Europe, what is actually on the mind of Europeans in all different countries. We delivered the results of the analysis directly to the hands of policymakers, and we also involved the audience, because it's very important to ensure that there is an active discussion which allows us to draw the conclusions at the end. I think the conclusions have been drawn without me. For me, like for others, it's clear that regarding the expectations of Europeans, a couple of issues stand out, and probably the question of climate and inequality are always at the top. Whether you ask millions around Europe, or whether you ask the audience here, these issues always come to the top, especially when we are discussing the critical questions of Europe with the younger generation. And this is very interesting, because exactly when this survey was conducted, there was a big debate in Brussels, in the EU institutions, about how to deal with the European way of life, whether it should be protected or whether it should be promoted, and what kind of institutional framework, a separate commissioner should be established for protecting or promoting the European way of life. I think what comes up from the survey and the discussion, that of course we appreciate the quality of life, but when we speak about Europe, we always speak about an ambition, and we have an expectation towards the European Union, not simply to protect the status quo, because there are many unacceptable elements of the status quo, especially when we point out the really alarming trends of inequality and the lack of sustainability when it comes to how the economy functions and how we use and waste energy and raw materials. So the Europe we want is one with more equality, one with greater sustainability, and one that can uphold democratic standards, because that's also something we cannot afford losing. And it's definitely a dream in the sense that the European citizens value these achievements, but it's something for which we have to fight day by day, because they cannot be taken for granted that these achievements would somehow fall from the sky. So it's very much a matter of the right analysis, which we receive today, but also the political and the policy process in which we're going to participate also in the future. Finally, for everyone who perhaps newly connected with FEPS today, Europe Day, I would also like to highlight that there is a sequence of very interesting online events, which we are going to advertise through the Twitter channel, through the website of FEPS, so please pay attention. Most importantly, the emblematic event of FEPS, which comes on 10 and 11 of June, Call to Europe. So today we had one Call to Europe, but again, we are going to repeat it, in fact, in an even greater format, but again, in an interactive way. Thank you very much for joining today.
Thank you very much, Laszlo. Thank you very much to all of our speakers, and make sure to follow still the EU Dream online. Thank you very much. Have a nice Saturday, and goodbye.